On behalf of the Queen's Student Alumni Association, I would like to begin by acknowledging our presence on the Indigenous lands across Turtle Islands, from wherever you might be accessing the event. While all of us here are encouraged to honor the history of the land from your respective location, it is my responsibility to reflect about QSAA and the privileges we experience as a result of a colonial project. Queen's University and the organizations that represent this institution have deep colonial roots, and it is only through colonialization and destruction that I have the ability to learn, work, and play on these lands and waterways. We need to be open to the truth of the past and be willing to listen, learn, and attempt to understand our own positions and what has come to us as a result of those who came before. I urge us all to consider our positionality as we gather online today. Obviously, this year looks a bit different. Typically, an event would not be held from my dining room, but with this being said, please carefully follow our code of conduct. Once again, we ask that all participants please keep their cameras turned off and stay muted during the session. During the Q&A portion, all questions will be directed to Aryan Chowdhury through the chat function. They can be directed to the entire panel or a specific panelist. This session will be recorded so that students who are unable to attend the live session will be able to watch it after. We remind everyone to be respectful and have a safe discussion. And now we are going to begin the panel portion of our event, and I will hand it off to our lovely moderator, Aryan Chowdhury.
Hi everyone, as Shasha said, my name is Aryan Chowdhury. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm this year's president of the Queen's Student Alumni Association. And more importantly, I'm a fourth year applied economics student who's unsure of what their plans look like post-grad. That being said, we're going to begin this conversation by asking everybody where they currently stand with their post-grad plans. So on your screen, you should see a poll that will pop up, and I'll just leave it up for a minute for everyone to answer. Perfect. So on the screen, you can see all of the polling results. And I think similarly to myself, we're all kind of all over the place with what we want to do after our undergrad. And I'm sure that our wonderful panelists will ease a lot of our worries and answer the many questions I'm sure that we all have. So I'm going to begin by introducing our first speaker, Britney Mcbeath. She is a Kenyan Keha Ka student in her second year of doctoral studies within the School of Kinesiology and Health Studies at Queen's University. She is of mixed ancestry with Mohawk roots in Tyendinaga, Mohawk territory on her mother's side, and her father's side is primarily Scottish. She is currently studying Indigenous health promotion, completing her research in partnership with the Kananawakwe School Diabetes Prevention Project under the direct supervision of Dr. Lucy Levesque. She is also committed to the revitalization of Kenyan Geha Onkwa Wenena Mohawk language and culture. Her master's research explored diverse conceptualizations of wellness by First Nation communities across Turtle Island. For doctoral research, she hopes to bridge her current studies and personal passions to explore the intersection of Indigenous language, learning and revitalization, and the promotion of community wellness. Our next speaker is Caroline Marful. Caroline is passionate about the need for greater diversity and equity in the public sector and nonprofit decision-making spaces. She co-founded the Queen's Female Leadership in Politics Conference, which is the first Canadian university conference launched to inspire and equip young women with skills, connections, and guidance to pursue leadership roles in politics. She co-hosted the Women's Forum on the Economy Global Meeting in 2018 and is an alumna of the Girls 20 Girls on Board program, which placed her on board of Sketchworking Arts. She has participated in roundtables about reimagining nonprofit governance, economic engagement for the G7, and sits on the FemWorks Collective. Caroline has worked with provincial and federal governments and has recently completed her master's in comparative politics at the London School of Economics. She has completed her BA in political studies at Queen's in 2018 and intends to graduate from Queen's Faculty of Law in 2023. Next up, we have Matthew Mellon. Matt is a fifth year life sciences graduate currently pursuing post-degree studies in arts and science. He has a strong focus on policy and advocacy. He has been involved with the Alma Mater Society and the Arts and Science Undergraduate Society at Queen's for 3 years now in leadership roles. He is a current commissioner for external affairs in the AMS, and last year he was the academics commissioner at ASIS. In 2018, he was also the president of the Life Sciences Department Student Council. Within these roles, he has worked with other student leaders to advocate for a positive academic experience for Queen students through providing feedback on topics like course evaluations and fall term break. Last year, Matt applied to graduate schools for a research-based Master of Science in Neuroscience and a Master of Public Administration. After receiving his acceptances, he chose not to attend, instead choosing to be part of the Queen's community for 1 more year to take time to learn about his career goals and to develop a professional skills. Next up, we have Stefan. Stefan is a consultant in KPMG's Canada's management consulting practice, helping organizations better adopt and leverage technology to transform their operations and better meet the needs of their clients across a variety of industries, including government, telecommunications, and healthcare. Stefan graduated from Queen's in 2019 with a bachelor's degree in life sciences and was involved in a variety of extracurricular activities, including Muse Magazine, the AMS Pub for Services, Walk Home, ASIS Orientation Week, Department Student Councils, and as a volunteer at Kingston General Hospital. Stefan served as a vice president of the Arts and Science Undergraduate Society, ASIS, from 2017 to 2018 and was involved in a number of initiatives, most notably the design and implementation of the ASIS Store, an online e-commerce platform with first-year revenues of over $500,000. Now that I've introduced all of our wonderful and incredibly impressive speakers, we're going to get into the moderate discussion of this evening. We have our first question, and I think you should be able to see all of our speakers on the screen. At your time at Queen's, you were all involved in the Queen's community in a variety of ways. Do you think this impacted your choice in choosing to apply or to not apply to grad school, whether this was directly out of undergrad or sometime after? And I guess we can go Matt, Stefan, Caroline, and then Brittany.
All right, yeah, I can take it away. That's a really great question. I would say it definitely did probably have the biggest impact on my decision to apply to grad school, specifically with respect to my experience as the academics commissioner for the Arts and Science Undergraduate Society, or ASIS. As Arian mentioned earlier, my major was in life science, so that was really the only subject matter I was exposed to for my undergrad, really sciencey stuff. I was in a specialization, so I really didn't even take courses outside of science up until my 3rd and 4th year. It was my experience in ASIS that really gave me exposure to a whole other side of things that I was never really used to. I did a lot of work with policy and the academic regulations within the Faculty of Arts and Science, and making policy recommendations to the faculty and administration. And through that really gave me a deep interest in public policy and that whole side of things. And that was probably the driving factor for me choosing to apply to a Master's of Public Administration here at Queen's. And I think that that's really important to realize, because it just goes to show that, it doesn't have to be your coursework or anything like that, that really has the impact on where you want to go for grad school or through your career. Those extracurricular and co-curricular experiences can really have an even bigger impact than what you're doing in the classroom. So that's something to keep in mind as well.
Thank you, Matt.
There we go. Okay, can you hear me all right? Okay, sweet. I would say, I was pretty involved at Queen's. Personally, though, I would say that I think my decision to not pursue graduate school was really affected by the extracurriculars that I did. I think either way, I probably would have gone straight into the workforce rather than pursue graduate school. And that was just because at the time, I did 5 years at Queen's, and I felt like it was time for me to move directly into the workforce. I had great experiences in my extracurriculars. And but overall, I think just generally, like I was ready to leave school for a little bit and kind of move on from that. So yeah.
Okay,
sorry, I struggle with Zoom. I think I'm a little similar to Stefan in that regard. I definitely was very into the Queen's extracurricular scene, and I found it quite empowering. And I think because of that, I wanted to move somewhere new and apply the knowledge I had gained in a new environment. I thought, I mean, I'm going to end up in the world of work, so I might as well give it a try, see how I feel about it, and then decide my next steps from there.
And then for myself, so I always knew that I wanted to pursue grad school of some sort. I'm that type of person where I kept to my personal statement of experience upon applying to Queen's, and I reread it like after graduating from my undergrad, and that's something that I had written down in my PSC, is that I was this was like kind of a stepping stone to pursuing graduate studies, so it was something that was always on my radar. But being in the psychology department, I think a lot of us see ourselves on a trajectory to become a clinical psychologist, which is extremely, extremely competitive. And I also think that we see ourselves on that trajectory because we don't all know how broad our experiences, like how broad our knowledge is after our undergrad. So we don't know about all the opportunities out there for us. So then I learned in my second year about occupational therapy, and I thought, oh my goodness, that's right up my alley. And it's also less scary than other potential grad school options because it was a professional program. So you go to school for occupational therapy and then you look for a job as an occupational therapist. It's very simple and straightforward. Whereas a research-based master's for me was something that seemed kind of ambiguous in what I would do with it afterwards, because there were so many different opportunities. It just depended on where you wanted to take it. So I ended up applying for occupational therapy and decided not to move forward with that path. And instead, I pursued a master's in the School of Kinesiology and Health Studies with the lab that I completed my undergraduate thesis with. So I met my current supervisor in my third year of undergrad, and this relationship flourished out of my extracurricular involvement at Queen's through Four Directions Indigenous Student Center. And so I worked with Four Directions as a community mentor with their Right to Play program, offering type 2 diabetes prevention activities for youth, Indigenous youth and non-Indigenous youth in the Kingston and surrounding area. And so that kind of was my passion. I really liked positive youth development. I really liked health promotion and things like that. And it does bridge with that psychology background as well, even though I was moving to the Department of Kinesiology and Health Studies. But yeah, so I guess my involvement led to my graduate studies. So even though I was already planning on going to graduate studies, it definitely shaped my path.
Perfect. Thank you all so much. I think it's super comforting to hear that no matter what path you kind of take, you're going to end up fine in the end. So that kind of leads to my next question. I think I can say candidly that the last year of undergrad can be incredibly intimidating. Do you have any advice for graduating students? And maybe this time we'll go Stefan, Brittany, Caroline, Matt.
Yeah, so in terms of my advice for graduating students, I would say the most important thing is take the pressure off yourself. You know, I think we as students can put a lot of pressure on ourselves to have like the perfect or quote unquote perfect plan after we graduate. We feel like a lot of the people around us are getting into these fancy programs or getting these really amazing jobs and stuff like that, and they can kind of feel like a lot of the people around you may be succeeding and you may not feel like you have that solid direction. Or on the other hand, you may.
Stefan, I think you just cut out for a second. Can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah, so just give me a heads up if I can't connect or if I cut out again. But I would say, give me a heads up if I can't connect or if I give me a heads up if I can't connect. You guys heard a little bit of what I just said, but yeah, there's no perfect option right after you graduate. And we live in a world that is so many different options for what you can pursue afterwards. And so I would just say pick something that feels right in your gut. You can always pivot later on after you graduate. There's so many different options and so many different routes available to people in this day and time. And so I would just definitely say pick something that feels right, explore it, get that experience, and if it feels right, continue with it. If not, you can move on to something else.
Perfect. I think your video is out of line with your audio, Stefan.
Okay.
But I think then our next panelist can go. Their piece of advice.
Okay, so I think my piece of advice would kind of go off of Stefan's, and I feel like you'll hear me say this through the entire panel, but I think my advice, I guess, going out of your undergrad is think about what you want to do as a human in the world. Like, I just feel like your friends might have together, like I studied politics, as you heard, and it felt like at Politics at Queen's, everyone was either moving to Ottawa, working with their dream politician, or like got into some cool consulting job, or we're going to be president of the student society. I mean, Stefan was around, like it seemed like a lot, and I was very insecure a lot of the times and very confused, feeling like I didn't have the marks to do things, feeling like I didn't know where I was going to fit in. But I think if you think about what you want to do in the world and what you think you can contribute and what you might want to learn, that's a great place to start. I know I called so many people, and people were very friendly from Queens and beyond, being like, I'm in 4th year at Queens. I really like XYZ. I think I might want to do this. Do you think you could help me with some organizations that you think might be in line with what I like to do? Or do you have any like recommendations of books I could read or podcasts listen to, something, so I could start framing my own, I guess, world perspective and what I wanted to do. It's definitely in a later question, so we'll get there. But I think if you take intentional steps to follow what you're feeling in your heart will fit well for you, honestly, it works out. It all works out.
Yeah, I think I want to reiterate a lot of what Stefan and Caroline already said, in that, there's no perfect route to take after you graduate, and you don't need to have it all figured out. And most importantly, you don't need to be in a rush. I think that's a big thing I realized last year, is that, everybody has this sort of mindset of, you do your undergrad in 4 years, even doing your undergrad in 5 years seems like something that's not very traditional, but it actually is very conventional. And everybody feels like, it's 4 years of that, and then you go straight into grad school, you go straight into the workforce, or whatever it is. You need to have a plan, and it needs to fit the mold of what, might be considered proper. But something I learned is that that's really not the case. Again, if you don't have it all figured out, you can try something. If it ends up not working out for you, you can stop that and try something different. If you go to work for a little bit and then you go back to school, that's fine as well. If you take a gap year and do absolutely nothing to figure it all out, and then you go back to school after that, or you go get a job after that, that's also fine. There's no perfect recipe for what it should look like. And most importantly, if you aren't working right away, or if you aren't doing something right away, just keep in mind that, all of us here, we're all very young. You don't need to be getting into the workforce or having a career so soon. You have your whole life to work. So use your early to mid 20s, even late 20s, to figure out what you want to do, and don't put pressure on yourself when, whatever you do, it'll be the right choice for you.
So I feel like the advice that I want to give is kind of contradictory because on one hand, I'm going to say definitely plan ahead. Even though like the last year of your undergrad can be incredibly intimidating, like you mentioned, I know myself personally, I was already like thinking ahead of what was coming next when I was in my second and third year of undergrad. So I was already just like thinking about those things, researching those things. And then once I got into my master's, I was researching the accelerated nursing program. Like I was looking at what was next for me after this degree as well. So on one hand, I would say plan ahead. Don't necessarily leave it to your last year and just kind of see what's out there. Start building those relationships because especially if you're hoping to do a research-based master's, those relationships with faculty members who could potentially be your supervisor are very important to start nurturing, and so you can maintain those even after your undergrad. But on the other hand, I will say ride the wave and just kind of make sure you leave your options open and, whatever kind of feels right for you as a next step, like go with that. And it doesn't mean that the other options that you had for yourself are going to be off the table even after you finish that. That's what something my supervisor said to me. She's like, well, right now, like I have a huge grant and there's so much opportunity to do research right now. And occupational therapy is always going to be there for you after these 2 years if you still feel that you want to go back and do that. So I would say plan ahead, but ride the wave.
Perfect. Thank you all so much for being so candid with your answers. The next question's directed towards Matt. Matt, I think you had a bit of a unique experience with your undergraduate experience and deciding what you wanted to do post-grad. Could you please explain to us your thought process throughout your undergrad and then how it's kind of different in your fourth year and how that's now kind of shaping what you want to do post-grad?
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, so just to reiterate sort of what Ariane touched on in my intro. So in my fourth year, I decided to apply to two quite different master's programs. One, a research-based master's in science and neuroscience, and one, a master's of public administration, which is more course-based and public policy oriented. These two were quite different than what I had imagined for myself all throughout my undergrad. I was very, I was in Lifesci and I really wanted to do medical school. And not to say that I'm not interested in that anymore, that is still very much a possibility, but I kind of came into my fourth year in my involvement in ASIS, figuring out new interests for myself and where else I might want to go and where else I might be equally, if not more interested in going with my life. So going into fourth year, that's kind of how I shifted. But obviously I'm not in any of those places right now. I'm still here working for the AMS this year. So in terms of how I got from there to where I am now is really what's interesting, I think. And at the end of the day, it kind of goes back to what I was saying in my last answer, in that there's no need to be in a rush, I guess. At the end of the day, I obviously had a few options. I did get into a few of my programs that I applied to, but at the end of the day, I was just really torn on what to do. I didn't know which one I wanted more, and I didn't know which one would work out better. I do want to add that it's very possible that, whichever one I choose, I would have been happy. I like to think that I have multiple first choices, which is a good situation to be in. But at the same time, I didn't know which one I wanted to do. And, with working for the AMS, this was something that, you have to do as an undergrad. So this couldn't wait in theory, whereas all the other choices could wait, I guess. So that was kind of my rationale for choosing this, and that, it was the more urgent option, I guess you could say. But the real reason why I chose this is because I just kind of needed more time to figure it out. And again, I just didn't want to be in a rush. I didn't want to rush into anything that I wasn't sure about. So I decided to take the year. Those programs would be there for me when I, finished this year, and then I could actually decide what I wanted to do.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Matt. Right. The next question is for Caroline. So Caroline, you've had an incredibly diverse post-grad experience, from working to then going internationally for your master's, and now coming back to Queens to complete your JD. Could you walk us a little bit through your thought process through all these different things that you did post-grad?
Okay, so I'm happy to walk you through it, and I think this is going to relate right back to my first answer, maybe my second one, about finding out why, what you want to add to the world, where you think you can do it, like why you're great to do it. Because all through my undergrad, I was like, I guess I came to undergrad thinking, I'm going to go to law school. I want to be a lawyer. Law is how you make change. Yes, me, go, LSAT. And then I started studying for the LSAT in like second year, and I was terrible at it. Like, so much so that it was causing me so much anxiety, and I had to focus on other things because it was bringing me down as a human. And so I started to think, but why do I want to go to law school? I want to go to law school because I want to make public change. What's another avenue that makes public change? Oh my goodness, the public service. Like, I can definitely play to my strengths and work for the government. And I think there need to be more excited, passionate people there. And so that's why I chose right after school to go work for the provincial government. So I tried to leverage all my knowledge from my extracurriculars at Queen's, and I had the chance to work at the Treasury Board, but it was actually in their Public Service of the Future office. So it was all about planning like what the public service is going to look like in the next 20 years and how do we get top talent to come in. And so I was like, that's perfect. It's about like inviting young people to come work. And like, frankly, it was not what I thought it was going to be, but I was so much better for having done it. I think when you're in university, you get very used to being around young people and people that you feel as though you have a lot in common with. And I think learning that working dynamic not only helped me in my master's, it's helping me now in law school. But during my year of working, I had all these questions on my mind gnawing at me all the time. I was like reading the news, I missed seminar, and I was like, I never saw this coming. And so I decided to apply to grad school. At that time, I decided to dream big and apply to like my dream schools in the world to go abroad. If any of you have questions about that, feel free to message me at any time, because I wanted to learn from a different perspective. I felt like at Queen's, I got a wonderful Canadian political perspective, but I was like, you know what? I don't know where I'm going to end up in the world. So let me take this time. I decided to specialize in my master's in political economy because that was something I didn't do enough of in my undergrad. And I figured that like economics is a massive part of making change. And so it was super helpful that in my statement, I could write like, I like to make change. That's why I did these extracurriculars. That's why I went to the public service. That's why I want to come to grad school. And I had an absolutely incredible year. Like, my supervisor was super, super helpful. He taught me so much. But funnily enough, I realized the last piece of making change that I felt I needed to know to do what I want to do with my life was in the law. So I really got all the way back to like my 10-year-old and my high school dreams, and then applied to come to law school. But then even then in my statement, I can say, I want to be a lawyer because I want to learn X, Y, Z to make these changes, and I've done these things to get me on this route, so I'm sure. And I was so glad I took the time and took the 2 years and like studied for a long time for the LSAT because I needed the time, but also so I could experience other things and develop as a person. And now that I'm in law school, like, the truth of the matter is, I don't think I'm going to be a practicing lawyer on Bay Street or like on the Supreme Court someday, right? Like, the reality is I want to work on issues about making sure that policy is equitable as we move into the knowledge economy, because existing disparities are going to get larger and larger and larger. And if you look at like the extracurriculars that I did, from the AMS and a lot of academic stuff to the public service to studying political economy to now studying labor law, it's all connected. And I think that's going to be super helpful for me going forward, that there's a discernible thread. And so that's why I keep encouraging people to find your why, what you want to help and how you're going to get there.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Caroline. We're definitely glad to have you back at Queen's. So the next question is for Brittany. Your undergraduate degree was in psychology and sociology, and now you're pursuing a kinesiology and health studies PhD. Can you tell us a little bit about what led you to make the shift?
So I think it's very similar even to what Caroline was just saying about how it's all connected, and how what we do and how we move through our career really stems back and always goes back to our why. And so I think the reason why I ended up switching to the School of Kinesiology and Health Studies was because that's the department that my supervisor who I met in third year. That's the department she was in. And her program of research aligned well with my why, and wanting to make my graduate studies experience very culturally relevant, and so that I could kind of still do my own little journey of self-discovery and do the work that I want to do in my community, as well as pursue graduate studies. So I could do something that was really going to benefit my home community in the end. And I could also tailor it as well. I felt that with the research-based master's, I could tailor it to my own personal interests. I could tailor it to be more culturally relevant, compared to like a professional program where I was just going to be taking classes and writing exams and then coming out as a professional, I guess, and going into the workforce. But yeah, I never would have saw myself doing a PhD. And even when I did my master's, I wasn't like, that wasn't on my radar at all. I thought I was going to kind of go work in the community after my master's. But I applied for Tri-Council funding, and it was very hard to turn that down. So here I am.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Brittany. The next question is for Stefan. So I think you had a bit of a different experience than some of our other panelists, where you had an internship that eventually led to a full-time position, and where you work now. What advice would you give students who are trying to take the same path? And did the internship path play a large role in deciding what you wanted to do as a career eventually?
Yeah, awesome. So, so to give you guys an idea, I did an internship at KPMG in management consulting between my 4th and my 5th years at Queen's. I came back to Queen's, finished up, and then the following September after I graduated, I started at KPMG full-time. And I've been there for a year since, and it's been, yeah, fantastic. Obviously, the internship played a big decision in choosing that career. You know, I applied for the internship because I really thought that this was something that I wanted to do. And after having done the internship after 4 months, and I was confident that this was like a career that I wanted to pursue in the future. And so I chose that afterwards. And yeah, you're absolutely right. Like, I think it's becoming less and less common for people to enter the workforce directly after they finish their undergraduate degree. You know, I think you hear a lot of the time, like, the undergrad is the new high school, whereas like almost everybody goes to undergrad, and then afterwards people's paths split. Whereas I think maybe in our parents' generation or the generation before, your path started to split after high school. You know, now it's a lot more common to do an undergrad. And I think that something that I noticed among my peers after I finished my undergrad was that a lot of people were really hesitant to join the workforce. They didn't believe that they had the skills or the experiences or the exposure or the connections that they needed to really start working full time. And like, I can tell you, to be honest, like, I showed up for my first day as a consultant full time. And I was sitting there and I was just like, even though I had done the internship, I had heard that when you start full time, it's a lot harder. And then it's a different pressure and a different experience because you're a full-time staff. You know, you're not just there for a little bit. You know, when you're an intern, it's almost kind of like you're being babysat. Everybody's watching you. Now that you're full time, you got a lot more experience and you got a lot more responsibility. You know, they're really investing in you. And I can tell you, like, I showed up on my first day, and for those first few weeks, like, I didn't have any of the skills that you needed to actually be like a full-time consultant. But the thing was, nobody expected me to have those skills. And that is, I think, the important distinction. I wasn't hired because I had all of the previous experience that would make me a good consultant. I was hired because they saw something in you that they believed would make you a good consultant. And they hired you and they brought you on because they wanted to nurture you and mentor you so that you got those good skills, so that you could serve like as a consultant and work full time, really drive value for that company. And so the short answer is, for a lot of people who may be considering entering the workforce right away and may be hesitant and think that they don't have the skills or the experience, to be honest, like a lot of us don't, but nobody's expecting you to know what you're doing on day one. Nobody's expecting you to come in and to know how to do the job right away. All of those people who are hiring you have been in the exact same spot that you are in now. They were fresh from their undergrad. They didn't have much work experience. They maybe only did, a few internships or maybe one or two, but they see something in you. They see something in you that they believe they can kind of unlock and nurture in order for you to really be a good employee. And so if you're hesitant about joining the workforce immediately, just know that it's not about the most amount of experience or who has the most relevant experience in the field that you're applying for, because you'll gain all that within the first year on the job. So I would say believe in your abilities and just know that it's possible for absolutely anyone.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Stefan. So now back to a question for all of you. And I know some of you touched on this in the previous questions, but personally going to university, I think I had a one-track mind on what I wanted to do. I was very set on it throughout my undergrad, but that quickly changed as soon as I sat in on my classes, talked to different people that had different interests than me, and participated in the different extracurriculars that I did. When all of you entered university, did you have a set plan of what you wanted to do post-grad? And if so, does where you are now look different?
Arian, I think you're just on mute when you said that. I didn't quite get that.
Oh, the last part?
Yeah.
Okay, so just for the order, maybe we can go Stefan, Matt, Caroline, Brittany.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so when I first entered undergrad many, many years ago, I wanted to go to med school. I studied life sciences. I thought that was exactly what I wanted to do. And I tell this to a lot of people who are applying for consulting now. They ask me, did you always want to go into consulting? Was this a long plan that you slowly built up to? I would say absolutely not. I was very bright-eyed. Yeah, I thought med school was the path for me. I ended up volunteering in the hospital, and I kid you not, day one, I showed up to volunteer in the cancer wing. And after volunteering for 3 hours, I thought, absolutely not. Like, I cannot do this for the rest of my life. And I learned throughout my undergrad that it wasn't the material or the actual content that I was studying, because I found the human body really interesting. I found like life sciences and the sciences that I learned behind my studies really, really interesting. It was that through a lot of my extracurriculars, I found that I liked more broad, high-level strategic thinking, and that doesn't come in your career as a doctor until much later. As a doctor, you work mainly one-on-one with patients. And I personally, while that work is obviously so important and very fulfilling to some people, I didn't think that I would find that fulfilling. I needed something more broad, more strategic, where I was managing, whether it was a team, more resources, something just a lot more high level and a lot more strategic. And so I did, a number of extracurriculars where I learned that. I also found that I loved project-based work, and I found that in a lot of my extracurriculars. The thing that I liked more so than the actual extracurriculars themselves was coming into a position, identifying any kind of bottlenecks or areas in which that position could be improved for future people who want to step in, kind of identifying where we could make changes to be more efficient and operate at a higher level, and then making those changes and then leaving and moving somebody else into the position so that they can take their perspective and identify whatever they want and make the changes that they want in the future. And it's those, I guess, kind of whatever you'd like to call it, like the aspects of those jobs that I liked that led me to consulting. And, it was definitely like a long road, completely different than what I ever thought I would pursue in the first place. And similar to, I think a few people had mentioned this here, just talking to your peers, getting to know people from a wide variety of fields. I know people who are lobbyists in Parliament. in Ottawa, or I talked to doctors themselves. I talked to people who worked in consulting firms, people who had, gone to law school. I tried to consider everything. I tried to pick at the pieces of everybody's jobs that I liked and that sounded appealing to me. And then you put that all together and you identify your story, all these different aspects and why you find them interesting. And then you try to find a career that best matches that. And I mean, I said this before earlier, and I think this is really important. Sometimes you think you have a great idea, you think you have a really solid idea of exactly what you want to do, and you go into that career and it's not what you thought. And that's okay. But honestly, and like I want to say this to everybody who is listening, like we live in a world where technology and the way in which we do work is changing at such a rapid pace. And the jobs that exist today are not going to exist in 20 years from now. And so the mentality that everybody needs to take is not what is the job that I want to do for the rest of my life. It's what are the skills that I want to become an expert in for the rest of my life. And then identifying jobs that match those skills and shifting as those jobs change and as those skills become in more demand. I think that's what's really important for our generation, because just the jobs that exist aren't necessarily going to exist in 20 years. And so learn to start identifying those things and then build a career around that.
All right. Yeah, I feel like Stefan honestly took a lot of words out of my mouth because, and I'm going to pull from his answer, but because I also came into undergrad dead set on medical school. And then that continued really for a long time throughout my undergraduate experience. What's a little bit different is I got my clinical experiences early on and I actually did love it. And it was something I could see myself doing. But the longer I went into my undergrad and the more I learned, and especially through my extracurricular experiences, like I mentioned before, I realized that there's more to it. There's more to my interests, and I'm not just so one-dimensional and kind of dialed in on one career path, and that I had multiple interests and I didn't know where I wanted to go. And that's kind of the biggest difference between then and now, I would say. I also really learned that, while I love that one-on-one aspect of helping people, I also really loved the ability to, advocate for whole populations and work with helping, groups of people and, going out and consulting with people and seeing what their needs are and working on large scale projects to really make change in a population. And I realized that, the way to do that is not just through a career in medicine. It could also be a career in government or public policy. And then when it came to it, I realized, again, like was already said, figure out what your unique interests are and carve your own path. So, I still do have that deep interest in health and the well-being of populations, but also have that interest in public policy and the way that can really mobilize change in large populations. So, what's the intersection of that? Well, there's health policy and health policy development on the governmental level. And that's something that I'm now looking at, which I never would have seen myself getting into at the beginning of my undergrad. So, it really is important to identify what your interests are, try new things, like I said earlier, I was in a Lifesci specialization. And that's all I was exposed to for so long. And then finally, as I got into the later years of my undergrad and I started doing more extracurriculars and started taking more courses outside of my major, only then did I realize that I actually have interests that I didn't even know about. So that's really important because that's going to let you see, what are your interests, and then you can take your interests and you'll learn more about when you take things that seem like they're not related, like politics and medicine and healthcare. In my case, you'll realize that there actually are intersections between those things, and that can kind of give you a better idea of what path you might want to go down.
Thank you. So now we'll go into the Q&A portion of the evening. So once again, if you have any questions at all, please feel free to send them in the chat function. And I know some of you have already started sending those questions. So I guess we can start off there. So the first question was, how did you know where to apply and how to apply with respect to making connections with professors and their guidance? And Caroline or Brittany, I don't know if you wanted to start off with this question. Perfect, Brittany, if you wanted to answer.
Okay, so how did I know where to apply and how to get in contact with different faculty members that could be your potential supervisor. So I guess narrowing down what schools offer the programs that you have, like you're interested in, would be key. And there's lots of information that I would look at on school websites and things like that, that usually outline admission requirements. So you can kind of see if you have positioned yourself in a way that makes you eligible for applying. Maybe you find out that you need to take a course in this or that to kind of position yourself well, what kind of grades that you need, things like that. So I think my primary resource was school websites. And then as far as getting in contact with faculty members, I think for me, it stemmed down to mentorship. And through my experience at Four Directions, and just getting to know lots of the staff there, and getting to know people who frequented there often, I was able to meet a lot of like-minded people, like-minded professors that were studying things related to Indigenous community health and wellness. So just by being in those spaces and by showing up and getting involved in the different aspects that you're interested in, like through clubs or through different organizations at Queen's, you're going to cross paths with a lot of people who may know of opportunities, maybe are going to encourage you to apply to different opportunities, or maybe just are going to know who you are, so that when there are opportunities that come up for maybe a volunteer position in their lab or a research assistant position in their lab, they're going to reach out to you because they know who you are. They've seen your face, right? So I think getting involved is definitely a great way to meet like-minded faculty members that are potentially going to be looking for graduate students in the future. Also, just like a more like aggressive way you can go about doing it is, don't be afraid to send them an email. Ask them, or just kind of express your interest in their area of study. Maybe look up a few articles that they've published and get familiar with their work. And then reach out to them and ask them if they have any opportunities in the near future, and let them know that you'd be interested. And even some faculty members are willing to kind of have a meeting with you or have coffee. Or with my supervisor, it was a walking meeting. She loves doing walking meetings. So yeah, just getting involved and not being afraid to reach out, I guess.
Perfect, thank you. Caroline, did you want?
Okay, I will say Brittany is the student you should be, like reaching out, getting involved, doing it. I was not that, right? Like to be honest, in my undergrad, I think like I majored in extracurriculars, minored in politics. Like I was always running from meeting to meeting. There were a couple of profs I was closer with, literally because of extracurricular calls and not even my participation in their classes. Also, I applied a year after school, so I was already gone. And something that I think differs in politics is, for a lot of the master's programs, you don't even get your supervisor for your dissertation till halfway through your year. So you're applying for a program without knowing who's even going to end up supervising you, which is a little overwhelming. But I would say I honestly picked where I applied for grad schools. Like I picked 7 grad schools. Not one of them was in Canada. I was ready to go. But also I looked at places that honestly, like no one in my family does politics, that I just liked what they were publishing. Like I would look at their website, like go to their Department of Government, see what they were writing on, what their profs were writing on, what their PhD students were writing on, what I thought was cool, and I applied to those schools. Like it's very funny. So the grad school I ended up going to, my favorite political economist, very nerdy I know, from my undergrad was at that school. And I was like, you know what, he's there and his people are there, and I'm just gonna go. I'm like, I'm gonna introduce myself and maybe he'll be my supervisor. And then I saw him and I was too nervous to say hello. But I think if you do take that path, once you get there, you get out of grad school what you put in. So my favorite political scientist was there, but he came out with a new book and I read it cover to cover in like 3 weeks. And when I was pitching who I was going to get for my dissertation supervisor, I knew I was going to be one of the only people who had read it, right? Because it just came out and I wanted to work with him more than anything in this world. And I had the chance to. And so I will say, like, don't undersell how much you know, because I think if you had asked fourth year me if I could ever go to LSE and like work with him, I would have said there's no way, I'm not that smart. But you apply and you go for it, but once you make it there, make sure you work hard too. So I would say definitely look into the school, what's going on there, who's researching there, who you might want to work with, and then just put your best foot forward. And I found reaching back to professors, they are so willing to help. So don't be afraid. I applied to 5 law schools and 6 grad schools and had the same 3 references from Queen's. And I did not get an A+ in any of their courses. So like, just know that people are on your side and looking out for you.
Perfect. Thank you both so much for those answers. I think with that question, there's definitely more than one answer and one route you can take. The next question is for the entire panel. Do you have any advice for those who feel like they don't have enough job or volunteer experience? This person said, I was hoping to do more this year, but now with COVID, a lot of opportunities are no longer possible. I already felt like I was falling behind, and now I feel like that gap is only going to grow. So maybe for this question, we can go Matt, Stefan, Brittany, Caroline.
Yeah, that's a really good question, I think. And I'm not sure what year the person who's asking is in, but whether it's first year or fourth year, I don't really think it matters in the end. With COVID, it obviously makes things a little bit more difficult, but I think that, don't underestimate and don't undersell the opportunities that you can get, even though they're remote. I think there's a lot of things that can still be done, and it just means that you just have to get a bit more creative with the skills that you're going to be gaining, because online or in person, volunteer, extracurricular, employment, whatever it is, there is always something to be gained from whatever you do, and it's just about how you leverage that. The other thing I wanted to say was that, again, like I said, if you're in first or fourth year, I don't think there's a schedule to follow or a timeline to stick by. I personally didn't get really involved in the Queen's community until I was in my third year. And I think that, I learned that you can do a lot in a short period of time, and you can learn a lot in a short period of time. So, never feel like you need to stick to a timeline or do things all spread throughout your undergrad. That, there's no prescribed timeline that anybody needs to follow. And I forget the other thing I was going to say, but maybe we can pass it off to somebody else. And if I remember, I'll let Aryan know.
Perfect. Stefan, did you want to go?
Yeah, so I feel like I already touched on this a little bit, but the one thing I will say is if there's a field, a company, or a graduate program that you feel like you don't have the necessary experience for, and you're unsure about whether to apply or to pursue that, the one thing I just recommend is reach out to somebody who's either in it or who has gone through it and get their perspective. People are more willing than what you would expect to share their experiences. And so whether it's like shooting somebody a message on LinkedIn, sending them an email and just saying like, hey, I'd love to chat for a half hour. I'm curious about this or that. Definitely research it a little bit beforehand so that you have a background and that, you shows your interest. But yeah, if you're ever unsure, reach out, see what is required or what the prerequisites are. And if you have them, it's fantastic. And if you don't, there's always another path that you can take to get those prerequisites.
Perfect.
Yeah, for this, what comes to mind for me is that it's hard to not compare yourself to other people and what they're doing. But I think we're our own worst critics, and we always feel like we're not doing enough and that other people are doing more than us. But going back to what was said earlier about not focusing on the job, but focusing on the skills and really being able to sell yourself. I think even if all you're involved in throughout your undergrad is going to class and completing your degree, and you didn't get involved very much in extracurriculars, that's okay. There's still so many skills that you maybe were able to, really nurture by just focusing on those classes. Maybe you have excellent written and oral communication skills now. You have research skills. You have advanced training in the interpretation of literature. So it's all about being able to sell your experiences and what you have gained from that, as opposed to feeling as though everybody looks better than you on paper. So yeah, that's, I guess, what I would say, is to just focus on selling the skills that you've gained, because just by completing your undergrad, you have so many skills.
I think what Brittany said is super, super important, because I think you could have the world's most full resume, and even still, if you can't properly say what you learned from it and how you're going to apply it in the future, it doesn't matter that you have 200 things on it. So whatever you do have and you have learned, definitely it's about framing it and finding why it'll make you a great employee somewhere or a great grad school applicant. And something else I'll say, I get it. Honestly, I came to law school ready to join 2 billion things, and there's no extracurricular in person. But I sent an email last week to this organization in Toronto that does super cool work. And I was literally like, hi, I'm Caroline in 1L. I researched your organization when I was applying to law school, and I think you guys are so cool. I would love to be your volunteer. If you don't take them, I respect that. I just wanted to say thanks for doing the good work, and can I join? And I think there's one thing that we can take from this remote world is opportunities don't necessarily have to be on this campus or right beside you. You can email some super cool people in Vancouver, or even in London, I don't know, just somewhere. So definitely go for it. But if it doesn't work out, know that you already have what it's going to take to be successful, and your experiences are enough.
Perfect, thank you. The next question is also, it can be generally for everyone, or if anyone thought this question was interesting to answer. A lot of people come out of 4th year still not knowing what they want to do career-wise. Do you think that pursuing grad school to help figure out what you want to do is a good idea? Or should you only go to grad school if you're very passionate about a certain topic or sector? Did anyone want to start off with this question? Okay, yeah, Brittany.
So I'm biased because I've been in grad school for 4 years now. And I truly believe that even if you don't want to end up in academia, that pursuing a graduate degree, whether at the master's or the doctoral level, is extremely beneficial. I think for me, grad school has been a time, a very introspective time, where I've been able to learn more about myself and learn more about the world and how I see the world in a very thorough and deep way that I would not have been able to do within the public sector, I don't think, or even if I was in the work world, I don't think I would have been able to spend that amount of time just reading and really thinking and writing about these topics. So I think it's definitely beneficial, especially if you're still not sure exactly what you want to do, because it's just that time where you're on that journey of self-discovery and figuring that out. And then you also come out with really, really great skills that you can market to the professional world afterwards. So I don't think it's a waste of time, even if you don't want to do academia, but it's definitely not the only path. And I think part of the reason why I didn't go to the work world right after undergrad was I felt like I wasn't qualified. All of those things that were said earlier, I was like, that's me. I'm still looking for more programs to do because I don't feel like I know enough, or I don't feel like I'm, prepared enough to start my career, I guess. So I continue being a student because that's where I'm comfortable, which is something that I also need to, maybe work my way out of. But I do think as well that, oh, what was I going to say? There's another piece I was going to say. Yeah, I've lost it. So I'll move on.
Perfect, thank you. Did anyone else want to touch on that question?
Okay, this is something I very much wondered about because finishing fourth year, I didn't know. My advice would be, it's funny because like I totally understand what Brittany was saying, but my advice would be get out there. Like just do it. Like there was this moment that I told my parents and I was like, I'm gonna run for AMS president because I can't leave Queens. I'm just not ready to do it. And my parents are like, no, you're not. Like you gotta move, like you gotta keep going. And I think my year in grad school was the best year of my life thus far, but it was because I felt so ready to be there. Like I wasn't there because I was trying to figure it out. I was there because I had questions and I went and got my questions answered in grad school and I came up with even more questions and I think I'll do my PhD someday. But I think that was very important because I have some friends from my program who went in and out and were like, grad school was kind of pointless. Like, I still don't know what I want to do. Like, it was interesting, but like, now what? You know what I mean? And I think it's really cool with what Brittany's done because she has the agency and she knows what she wants to do or the area she's passionate about. But just going to grad school does not bring a path. It like brings further knowledge and you have the chance to find a path, but that doesn't mean it's like a fail-safe, it's gonna come after the 2 or 1 year, because I have a couple of friends that banked on it and they feel the same that we did when we finished undergrad. So I would also caution about that.
So I just remembered what I was going to say. And it's about the word career, because when I hear the word career, I think, what am I going to do for the next 30 years of my life till I retire, like my parents did? Like my mom became a nurse. She's been a nurse since she was 23. She's about to retire. Like that was it, right? And I think it's harder for our generation to find those jobs that are so secure in that, like, I'm going to be there for 30 years with a pension and benefits and blah, 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 where our generation may wear different hats. Our career is going to involve a variety of different hats that we wear, but it's all going to kind of connect and be in line with the path that you want to. Like, it goes back to your why. So it's all going to align with your why and be connected, but you may wear different hats along the way. And I think that's kind of what's intimidating for me, is like, I don't really know what those hats look like. I don't know where to find them.
Good. Thank you both so much. The next question is, I'm just going to read out the question. Something I think everyone on the panel touched on is that the path after undergrad is not straightforward, but at the end of the day, you all found what was right for you. What do you think are key traits or skills for the workplace today that could be adaptable to many different workplaces? Did anyone want to start off with this question? Okay, Stefan.
Yeah, I think like for a minute there, you kind of all observed us like think about this for a minute. And I think that's because it really depends on the workplace that you want to go into and the skills that that workplace desires. And what I will say though, is that you already possess those skills and you may not even know it. And I'll give you guys like a funny example. I always find this funny. So I went into consulting, which is typically very limited to commerce students. And I was a life science student. I had taken very little commerce classes, or very few. And I, throughout my internship, had a ton of imposter syndrome because I didn't feel like I belonged or I deserved to be there. And it was because a lot of this basic like business knowledge I just didn't possess, and I had to learn it on the fly. And I constantly felt like I was learning things that other people already knew, and it just really made me feel like I somehow had gotten there by a fluke, or that I didn't do the same work or as much work as other people around me. But what was really interesting throughout my internship is that the skills that I learned in my undergrad, I saw it taking me much farther than those in a traditional commerce education. So for example, in consulting, it's a lot of project-based work. And as a firm, you typically write proposals. And what proposals are, for people who don't know, it's basically if an organization has a problem that they want you to solve, your firm submits a proposal. It's a long written response, can sometimes be like upwards of 100 pages of writing. And it basically outlines your approach for solving their problem. And I got very involved in proposal writing. And something that I noticed was compared to other people who were my age, I had much better writing skills. I could write much more concise. My writing was a lot more, I guess, hard-hitting, as opposed to a lot of the people who had studied commerce fields around me. And that was because of my science background. It was writing all of those lab reports. It was learning how to be really concise in a really short amount of space. What I also noticed was my ability to pick up new material and digest complex language that my peers otherwise wouldn't understand. That skill was a lot better than those around me. And that was because of all the papers that I read throughout my undergrad. I took a lot of like high-level neuroscience classes, and I was reading about a lot of these complex systems, these different pathways, and just about all these different drugs and cells and neurotransmitters. And it was a lot of this like vernacular that was hard to understand. And I found those soft skills, those things that you don't think about as skills, were things that carried me through my first year of work, were things that made me an asset at KPMG, were skills that I had that people were like, I want that. That's something that I want. And so you absolutely have those skills. Just learn to identify them.
Perfect. Thank you. Did anyone else want to take a stab?
Yeah, I want to follow up on what Stefan said, because he made a really good point about how, you probably have those skills, but you might just not know about it yet. I like to think about, where you can get all these skills from and how they really develop, whether you've done extracurriculars or not, whether you've taken courses in a variety of disciplines or not, it doesn't matter, because the skills are there to be taken. It's just a matter of you realizing that you've gotten them. When I think about an arts course, if you're doing a reading, you have to critically analyze that reading and form an opinion, and you have to get in the head of the author, and you might have to go present it at a seminar or write an essay about it. And that right there is a huge opportunity to learn communication, critical thinking, and inquiry skills. If you're in a science course and you have to write a lab report, or if you have to understand a very complicated pathway or whatever it might be, that's logical thinking. That's passively writing in a really concise way, and you're learning those writing skills, and those are just a couple examples of the skills that you can take away simply from being enrolled in a course. You don't even have to have a job. You don't even have to have an extracurricular experience to gain those skills. So, and then, think about all that you can gain from having that. It's not so much as, thinking about the skills that you need to succeed in a job and then trying to like gain those. It's about reflecting on your experiences and then thinking what you gain from those and leveraging your own experiences to kind of justify why you have a certain skill set. Because again, you probably do have that skill set. It's just about identifying what it is and being able to explain how you got it and how you can leverage that to your advantage.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Carol.
So as part of my 1 year working before I went back to school, I was lucky enough to get to manage the learning and placements of 16 provincial government interns. So those were people who were straight out of their undergrad or their master's, got to work in the government. And so I got to read their learning reports and their feedback from their placements, and some general trends I think I would say that might be helpful to think of in terms of your skills and how you present in the workforce. I would say first and foremost, always remembering humility. Like, you're all very smart. You made it to Queen's and you're making it out. Trust me, you know the stuff. But I think no matter how much you truly know, there's so much you don't, especially at work. Like, even if you're the smartest person in the room, by virtue of other people working there for years and years and years, there are going to be things about being in that space that you don't know yet. And so definitely taking the time to sit down, learn, and listen, but simultaneously also learning to trust your voice and finding safe spaces where people do want to hear your opinion. I think something about the interns that absolutely stood out was they were critical thinkers. Like, they asked why at the right time, but it wasn't why just to make a point. It was why with a suggestion or with an idea. So definitely respect that there's a reason why things, trust me, I worked in the government, but there's a reason why things work the way they do, but also that doesn't mean that's the best possible way for them to work. So I think always keeping that balance makes you kind of an indispensable employee, only because they couldn't replace you and have the same insights, right? That's something you're using to distinguish yourself.
Perfect. Thank you all so much. I think we have time for either one long question or two quick questions. I actually have a quick one for Caroline. It's very specific. When applying to LSE, because you had been out of school for a while and working, do they still take your fourth year grades from when you graduated Queen's for your master's?
Do they ever take their grades, your grades? But something that's super cool about LSE, you can definitely look into a couple of grad schools. So once you make the cutoff there, it's actually about your application as a whole. So if your grades get you into the pool, it's all about you. So I would say definitely always apply. There are also some super cool schools like abroad that also say, like, these are requirements, but in special cases, we consider other things. And I have friends who got in who didn't meet the cutoff, but had like a reason why this program was going to be paradigm shifting for them. So yes.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And then I guess this will be our last question for all of the panelists. Do you think you would have made a different decision? And Matt, I guess this kind of applies to you as well. If you were graduating this year, would you still have tried to enter the workforce or still have tried to go to grad school with everything surrounding COVID-19? Maybe for this question, we can go Stefan, Brittany, Caroline, Matt.
Yeah, so that's a good question. I think I know it's hard because especially for me specifically in consulting, like there's not a ton of hiring going on right now. Especially a lot of the hiring happens later. In my situation, I think it definitely would have caused me to more heavily consider grad school, only because the opportunities in the workforce aren't the same as they were pre-COVID. But I think I probably still would have entered the workforce, but it's hard to say. It's, it's a completely different world we're living in now. And yeah, it's hard to say. So I'll pass it on.
Yeah, so I guess depending on the program, we have transitioned to a primarily remote delivery of grad school within our department. But it definitely, depending on like your research area, like if you're in a lab, I know certain labs in our department were closed down, and like there's still, COVID is still affecting timelines for people in grad school. And so you may start your degree and COVID related policies and closures may cause you to need extensions and things like that and not be able to enter the workforce or move on from grad school as early as you had hoped. So I think that that's a consideration to make, unless you have an idea for a project or you're just in a professional program that all your classes are being offered remotely, that it's not really going to be affected. Maybe you can do it virtually. I think there's also a lot of more research going on kind of over Zoom or over the phone with interviews, qualitative interviews and things like that, or surveys. So there's definitely options to do projects in a way that will be COVID safe. But I definitely wouldn't say that grad school has been unaffected, and it's definitely something to consider if you're considering grad school during these times as well.
So I definitely respect and empathize with the job market that you're walking into. Like with every recession comes a wave of people trying to go to grad school just because opportunities are few and far between. But truly and honestly, I think I would have still tried for the job thing. I think I would have been a lot less picky than I was coming out of 2018. But especially I felt in my grad program, I gained so much from having a cohort. Like my program was small, every stream only had 10 people. And I even finished my year doing doing Zoom school, waking up at like 5 a.m. in Mississauga to try and like talk to my supervisor. And I felt very frazzled. And I think I would have missed out on the most important thing if I had tried to undertake that research remotely. And I feel like my kind of idea is when in doubt, make money. Like that's why I didn't go to law school right away. I wasn't 100% sure. I would like pay off my house app. Like anytime I'm not sure, I way rather make money than invest in a degree that I'm not 100% on. So I think I would have tried the job market.
Yeah, I think the advice I would give here is, again, like obviously things are different and things are a lot more challenging. There's added dimensions that need to be considered, but that doesn't mean it needs to derail your plans completely. I think it just means maybe it requires a bit more pragmatism. So, maybe grad school was your plan and now everything is online, and really just evaluate, is remote learning right for you? If it's not a huge deal, then, why do you need to change your plan? Grad school is still happening, right? If you don't think it's right for you, then maybe, that's when you reconsider. In terms of the workforce, again, maybe the jobs that you wanted aren't there anymore. So instead of committing to doing that, maybe investigate whether you think you might actually be able to get something. And then, it might not be exactly what you want. Maybe you have to be more flexible, like Caroline said. But at the end of the day, you might still be able to get something. So it's just about being a bit more pragmatic, I think. But it doesn't mean it has to derail your whole plans. You can still go follow through with whatever it is that you initially planned on doing.
Perfect. Thank you all so much. So we still had a bunch more questions, but I'm sure if you follow up with any of our wonderful panelists after this event, they'd be more than happy to answer your question. I just wanted to genuinely once again thank all the panelists for being so open and willing to speak to us about their experiences. I think I can speak on behalf of everyone here today in saying that your insights are incredibly impactful and beneficial to all of us, and we will definitely be using this advice throughout the rest of our undergrad and beyond. And then finally, to wrap up, we would like to thank everyone for attending QSAA's first event. The conversations that we all had today were incredibly engaging, and we're so happy to have you at our first event. After this event, we hope that we've helped provide some guidance for your post-grad plans, even though I'm sure it's still very, very intimidating. If you still have any questions, Queen's always offers a plethora of resources, from career services to the LinkedIn Queen's Connect group, and then of course our wonderful and diverse set of alumni who are always willing to help. So after the event, an email will be sent to all of your Queen's emails with more information on what life after Queen's looks like, and a survey that we asked you to please complete. So once again, thank you everyone for participating today and joining, and we hope to see you all at our next event.